probably want to know more about how to make this. So let's get to it. Hello, friends. Today I am going to show you how to draft a panel skirt. You are going to need a tape measure, a clear ruler. Clear is preferred, but you could get by with one that isn't clear. A longer measuring device is definitely preferred as well, if you have one. And this is called a hip curve. It is, kind of like a ruler, but it is curved. And of course, you'll want a writing utensil. I would typically use pencil for this, but in order to make sure that you can see it, I'm going to do it with a Sharpie. So it will be nice, big, bold lines that you can see. But I recommend that you use a pencil. So the first thing that you're going to do is take your measurements. You'll want to measure your waist. Okay? And then you'll also want to measure your hips. Your hips will be the widest part of your butt. It is also a good idea to measure how long is the distance between your hip and your waist. All right? And the last thing that you're going to measure is the distance between your waist and your knee and your ankle. And I want you to write those down. So, my waist is 28 inches. My hip is 40. That's with clothes on. You might want to measure yourself just in your underwear because you're probably not going to wear the skirt over your pants. Unless you are, in which case, rock on. Alright. So, there's the distance between my hip and my waist is 9 inches. And then from the waist to the knee is 22. And then from the waist to the ankle is 38. Alright. So the first thing that we're going to do is math. We are going to divide each of these numbers, specifically we're going to divide the waist and the hip by 8. So, an eighth of 28 is 3.5, and then an eighth of 40 is 5. If you're not very good at math, you might want to use a calculator. So the first thing that we're going to do when it comes to actually drafting this pattern is I'm going to draw a line that is the distance between my waist and my ankle, which is 38 inches. Right? Nice bold line with a Sharpie. Okay. Then, up here at the waist, we're going to draw a line perpendicular to this one that is the length of 1/8 of the waist, but make sure that the middle is where this line is. So my line is going to be 3.5 inches long, but that means that I want it to be 1 3/4 on each side of the line. Does that make sense to you? Okay. looks like a T, alright? And then we're going to do something very similar with the waist. We're going to measure the distance between the waist and the hip down from the waist. So mine is 9 inches, so I'll make a nice dot there. And then I will square off, that is to say, make it perpendicular. So I will have 2.5 inches on either side of the line. Then the hip curve comes in. This is what we use the hip curve for. If you have a really big difference between your waist and your hip, then you'll want the curvier end. If you're somewhere in the middle, then you'll want somewhere in the middle. And if you're very straight formed, then you'll want closer to the less curvy end. And do that. And then you'll want to make an idea of where exactly it is on your hip curve and do the same curve on the other side. This is what it looks like so far. The waist at the top, the hip there, and I'm going to say at the ankle, do the exact same thing that you did at the hip. That said, when you go to put in your actual design work into this, do not make your ankles the same width as your hips if you ever want to take any steps in this skirt. Unless you put a slit in it or something, then you would have some good ease of movement. But you will be making this flared. But for now, I'm making it the same straight, because then if you wanted to only go down to, say, your knee or whatever, which we'll put in a mark for that, is at 22 inches from the waist. Of course, it's an 18-inch ruler. That's not going to do. I mean, you could do it with your tape measure, but I find it easier to use the larger ruler. 22 inches. So that's where the knee is. I would square out from there as well, because we might as well. And then we will draw the line. This is your basic panel skirt pattern. Alright. So, from here, you'll have to decide for yourself how much flare you want in the skirt. Do you want a lot? Do you want just a little? If you make it straight like this, as I said, you're going to want to put a slit or something in it so that you have some ease of movement. You can actually walk. Alright. I guess I should show you how to put seam allowance on it. So I'm going to have to decide now how much flare I want. Which, this is also going to matter how much fabric you buy, of course. If you already have the amount in question, then you'll want to work within your ability to, like, put all the pieces on the fabric. I'm not sure that I want an ankle-length skirt. If that is the case with you as well, then decide how far down you want it to go on your belly and whatnot. You want it to go at your knees? You want it to go a little below your knees? I'm gonna say I want it to go 5 inches below my knees. So I will make the mark for that. Square out. How much flare do I want? I'm gonna say I'm gonna add 2 inches to each side. This. I wouldn't necessarily put the flare coming directly out of the hip unless you're going for like a conical look. I would put it a little bit below the hip. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to put it at 3 inches below the hip. Alright. And if you have one of these, then I recommend using it to make your curve here a little bit curvier and not quite so pointy. Alright, so I'm going to ignore that a little bit because I've decided I'm not making my skirt all the way to the ankle. And the last thing to do is seam allowance. I'm going to get these out of my way. Now, the amount of seam allowance that you use is pretty well up to you. If you are going to use the serger as your means of construction, then you'll want to make your seam allowance the width of your serger seam allowance. Except for this part where you're going to put the zipper, that should be no less than 3/8. So I'm just going to make 3/8 my seam allowance. And we're going to do this all the way around. Except, of course, for the hem, which should be a little bit bigger than that. A 3/8 hem would not really be enough. So I'm going to make 1 inch hem. So I'm going to point something out here. To make it easier to turn up your hem, at the bottom there, I pushed it in just a little bit. It doesn't go directly out because otherwise you'll just have like excess in that area. Whereas if you make it a little bit straighter, you won't have that excess. There you go. Okay, so now we make the waistband of it. And this is where it's going to come in very handy to have a very long measuring device. I have a 28-inch waist. I'm not bragging, by the way. So my waistband needs to be finished size of 28 because that's what the top of that skirt is. Alright, so we're going to draw a line that's 28 inches. Then, because we are going to have the overlap where the zipper is, I'm going to make it we're gonna use a real nice big chunky button, so I'm gonna make it 2 inches bigger. Inches bigger on one side, by the way. We don't need it over on both sides, but we do need seam allowance. And we're going to do a 3/8 inch seam allowance again. If I want a 2-inch waistband that's going to be folded over, then it needs to be 4 inches finished. Or 4 inches without seam allowance is what I mean. You know, I'm not a teacher, actually, so just put up with it, alright? I'm going to make a 4-inch measurement marks. And I'm going to connect that. That can be a good idea to do this side too. And we'll finish the seam allowance. This is your skirt pattern. Next up, cut it out. This is the waist, the hip, the knee, the hem. And here is the waistband. That is how you draft that. I'm going to clean up this area, and then we're going to cut it out. For this project, I am going to do what is known as a layer cut. So since I'm going to cut 8 of the exact same piece, I have the fabric folded so that there are 8 layers. And then I can cut them all at once. The rotary cutter is pretty nice. If you choose to do this, make sure you have a suitable mat, because cutting into your table would be a problem. It is also completely acceptable and respectable to use pins and scissors. I like to use cans because I don't have weights, so I use cans of food. All right. Now I have 8 identical pieces. I will set these over here. And I have to cut the waistband still, which I'm going to cut out of this section I only need one waistband, so alright. Now, even though I've got all of my pieces cut out, do not throw away the scrap yet. Just in case we have to do any work, mechanical repairs, etc. on any of our machines, I like to have scrap of the fabric that I'm working with to test the machine if I do something like change the tension or whatever. That way, I know that whatever I have done is appropriate for the fabric at hand. I could also potentially cut a pocket out of this, but I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to put a pocket on this.